All right, so can we see my screen? Yes, okay, fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about marketing and why it's important, particularly in times of downturn and recession, which no doubt we're going to find ourselves in shortly if we're not there already. So what we usually find in marketing is the knee-jerk reaction, or the traditional reaction to times of downturn, is to just cut marketing. Cease marketing activity and essentially just shut it right down. And this is a very outdated and old way of thinking. I'll go into details about why this is a bad idea a little bit later in the presentation, but it essentially boils down to the fact that it's easy, and it's a lazy CFO decision to just cut marketing and be done with it and not have to worry about the budget from there on in. But it's a very bad idea in terms of marketing through this downturn and also seeing business success on the other side of it. It will absolutely kill your business. And the reason for this is that marketing is not just the crayons department of a company anymore like it used to be. Marketing is now the leading part of a business. It has under its purview such things as customer experience, customer loyalty, branding, promotion, communication, campaigns, user experience, data analysis, and increasingly, because we are the front-facing customer aspect of a business, it's also informing innovation. And as we all know, as business students, in order to thrive and survive, we have to be constantly innovating. And it is also very important to note that marketing is the right hand to sales. Marketing can't work without sales, and sales can't work without marketing. They work together now. They're not one or the other, or either or. So moving forward, the thinking around marketing, and that it used to be a soft thing to do, really needs to change. Now, marketing is really driving a business. So essentially what we're saying is that cutting marketing tells your customers and potential customers that you are closed for business. If you stop communicating with your customers and potential customers, you may as well be invisible to them. It's pretty much the opposite of what you want to be saying at this time. So a few stats and a bit of an example for you. So Forbes has said that marketing budgets have become a key target for cost cutting ever since the last recession. Now, I would say that it's basically been the key target for cost cutting since forever, since marketing was a thing. Forbes is saying in 2018, budgets have decreased from 12.1% of average revenues to 11.3%. And this obviously was pre-COVID, so the stats are going to look a lot worse now. So marketing is being slashed, and as a result, companies are in decline. According to an analysis of the 2017 Fortune 500, 53% of corporates have experienced an after-tax profit decline, while only 47% saw profit growth. And I don't think that it's spurious to say that marketing directly leads to growth, and we'll talk about a few examples of that later on. However, a good example of this is that you might know that 3G Capital bought Kraft and merged with Heinz back in 2015. They took it public, and 3G is known to basically cut everything. So basically, in less than 2 years after merging Kraft with Heinz, its workforce was cut, its marketing was cut, its advertising was cut, everything was cut. And what followed is a pretty significant sales decline for 6 quarters in a row. And in 2019, Kraft Heinz dropped 30% at the open and lost $16 billion of its market value. So upon its debut, shares were around $80 US. And in March 2020, they were down to $22 or so. In the last couple of weeks, they've had a rebound because of hoarding of canned goods during COVID. They went back up to 35, but that's nowhere near the near $80 that they were at open. And as Forbes rightly points out, what it did is it stopped investing in its brands at a time when consumer tastes and behaviours are shifting and the competitive environment is intensifying. So consumers are now so savvy, they have so much choice at their fingertips, in their own hands, as they're on their smartphones. You simply cannot stop communicating with them at any time. So what we like to point out to people who want to cut marketing at this time is that you'll be months behind the competition should your business survive and you actually want to ramp it back up. So cutting marketing has both long, medium and short-term consequences. B&T has talked about multiple studies on companies which demonstrated increasing advertising and marketing spend by up to 20% in a recession saw an average market share gain of 0.5%. And those that increased beyond the 20% threshold recorded even more, of nearly 1%. So marketing through a recession, even with possibly decreased activity, will certainly hold a brand in firmer stead after the crisis than ceasing marketing altogether. The companies which increased ad spend during a recession did have to wait to see the results. So you do have to hang in there to see your ROI on it. But these companies did enjoy significant increases in market share from their increased budgets in the longer term. And I'm going to go on to talk about a couple of examples of this. So you might have seen this case study during the rounds. I know Mark Ritson has talked about it quite a lot. So an example of marketing through a recession would be Kellogg's in the Great Depression. So Kellogg's and Post were both cereal manufacturers back in the 1930s. When the Great Depression hit, Post reduced its spending while Kellogg's doubled down on its spending and moved into radio advertising and pushed its new cereal Rice Krispies, which we all still enjoy now. So the result of that is that by 1933, Kellogg's profits had risen almost 30% and Post basically disappeared. Nobody ever heard from them again. So the issue is that if you cut marketing, when the economy does ramp up again, if you have to start from scratch, you will be absolutely months behind the competition if you ever catch up at all. So some people may have even cut entire departments. If you can imagine cutting an entire marketing department, then having to rehire them, get them up to speed, and then start marketing, you're looking at least 6 months behind everybody else when it comes to ramping back up. And no business can afford that, particularly not in the current climate. We get it. Cutting is human nature. You can see it currently in the hoarding that's going on in Australia in COVID-affected areas. People naturally go into a siege mentality and they want to shore up what they've got. They want to make sure that they hang on to everything so that they don't lose anything else. So they cut budgets in marketing and advertising, and this is often closely followed by R&D. This is a massive, massive mistake because there's a trade-off to these cuts. They don't come without consequences. They might come with a better looking balance sheet in the short term, but in the long term, you're going to have significant problems catching back up. So the New Yorker, for example, has also reported that companies that keep spending on marketing, advertising and R&D during recessions do significantly better after the recession than those that make big cuts. So we've got a few examples of recent recessions. So in 1927, it was found that firms that keep ad spending stable or increase it during a recession saw their sales hold up significantly better than those which didn't. During the 81-82 recession, firms that increased advertising or held steady grew much more in the next 3 years compared to those that didn't and who slashed their budgets. And more recently, McKinsey in 1991 found companies that remain market leaders or become serious challenges during the downturn had actually increased R&D and ad budgets, while companies at the bottom of the pile had cut them. So there's all kinds of examples all over the interwebs to back up what it is that we're saying, but we can see that cutting marketing during these types of times is a really bad idea. And a lot of this is informed by, again, old thinking, the idea that we constantly have to have a new customer. We have to be sourcing out a new customer. We need to understand, and I think as business students, most of you do, that a loyal customer is far more valuable to a company than a new customer, and it costs you about 1/3 of the price. So what your customers actually think of you is everything, and this is what marketing does. It takes years to actually build this kind of customer loyalty that brands are now absolutely seeking, and it can take only seconds to lose it. Brand loyalty and trust is harder to get than ever before, but it does pay dividends. McKinsey demonstrated in 90% of categories they recently measured, consumers are not loyal to their chosen brands, and almost 60% will switch when considering a new purchase. So if you stop your marketing, if you stop communicating with your customers, there is nothing holding them to you any longer. They will move on. They have no qualms doing that. The important thing to also remember in marketing is that we are now the front-facing, customer listening, customer talking to aspect of a business. And all brands, no matter what they are, whether they're B2B, whether they're D2C, whether they're C2C, whatever they are, they have to be listening to their customers first and foremost. And this is what marketing now does. So we need to be listening to customers. We need to find out what they want. We need to find out what they need, and we need to actually measure that back against whether we're even providing it. A lot of companies that we've worked with in the past, they actually don't want to talk to their customers. They're too scared to find out what their customers actually think. And sometimes it can be scary because what you think about your company may be completely different to what your customer thinks about your company. But the most important thing is that you do actually have to be listening, because from there, everything grows. The loyalty grows, the profit margin grows, the innovation grows, because you're listening to find out what the people you rely on actually want. So a strong brand is vital to obtain and keep that vital customer loyalty. Perception is absolutely everything, particularly in the court of social media. Now, you can lose your reputation swiftly, but you can also gain it very swiftly if you open those lines of communication. So if marketing is cut, there's a chance you're jeopardizing your existing customers from enjoying their customer journey with you, let alone getting new customers. You're not going to if you're not marketing. So a few stats from Gartner. 80% of growth organizations use customer surveys to collect customer experience data, compared with just 58% of non-growth organizations. 43% of product managers at growth companies are using analytics to collect and analyze customer perception and sentiment data like NPS and that type of thing. This is compared with 22% of product managers at non-growth companies. So the issue is, by pulling the plug on marketing, you drain the information train to your existing customers, and they'll notice all the communications that they're used to from you have simply dried up. And as we've said before, this indicates to them that you are completely closed for business. They will abandon you and they will take their loyalty elsewhere. It's a huge turn-off to customers to stop communicating with them. And importantly, of course, we cannot talk about marketing without talking about the sales funnel. So marketing feeds the sales funnel at every aspect. The sales cannot operate without the lead gen that marketing brings in. So in order to stay in operation and gain new customers, you have to have some kind of level of marketing spend. The marketing funnel will always need to be fed. And once that lead gen dries up, then the funnel dries up, and then you're in real trouble. A common mistake is they see marketing as being lesser to sales. So as I was saying before, it's seen as a soft skill. It's seen as the crayons department. And this is a really old and outdated way of thinking. So marketing and sales is like Vegemite and Toast or Ben and Jerry's. They have to coexist, and they can't exist without the other one. Even the best product in the world won't sell if nobody knows about it. Forrester estimates up to 75% of the purchase process is completed before the sales department even gets involved. So no company can scale and grow successfully with only sales or only marketing. As tempting as it may be, the marketing can't stop, because marketing through this could mean you actually survive it. So as we've talked about, it can't stop because times get hard. It's an easy sell to cut marketing, because up until recently, marketing hasn't had a seat at the C-suite table. They're not there making their case. They're seen as an other department. and a soft skill. And don't even get me started on what society thinks of soft skills, but that's not the case. Marketing has under its purview some of the most vital business functions needed to operate in a consumer-centric world. And make no mistake, we are absolutely in a consumer-centric world. So we have to be putting them at the front and center of everything we do. We have to be listening to them, and we have to be providing them with what they need easily and efficiently. And marketing is the way to do that. So because we know at the moment the pandemic is still all over the place, and we're having a second wave here in Australia, life is unlikely to return to normal for quite some time. And once it does, businesses are going to be competing for a shrinking purse, and they'll need to stand out more than ever before. You can't capture and keep the minds and wallets of thrifty and very savvy consumers by contracting marketing and therefore customer experience. Some level of marketing activity has to be maintained during this time. And before I go on to a final couple of examples, I just wanted to make note of the human side of marketing, which I think sometimes gets lost. So while we now have under our purview all kinds of fantastic things to prove ROI, data, analytics, all this fantastic MarTech at our disposal, we can do amazing things with it. None of that is going to make the foggiest bit of difference if we forget what it is that fundamentally what we're here to do, which is to make human connections. Marketers create real, authentic human connections with people. And that's what we have to keep in mind and at the forefront of everything that we do. It's the most important consideration before we undertake anything, particularly in a recession. At the moment, customers are scared and they want to know that the brands that they rely on are there. They want to know that there is some kind of aspect of normality still going on. They want to see from your communications that everything is okay to a certain extent. So you need to communicate with them and they will be far happier for it. Marketing is the humanity of your business, and it opens the lines of communication and inspires loyalty from people. And that is fundamentally what we need to do. Okay, so I think also that as business students, you would know that nobody can cost cut their way to growth. It's just impossible. You can't grow a tree if you take it out of its soil and stop watering it to save money. It's never going to grow. It's certainly not going to flourish. So a certain level of investment must always be maintained. So Harvard's Business Review in 2010 found firms which cut costs faster and deeper than rivals don't flourish and have the lowest probability at 21% of pulling ahead of the competition when times get better. So Harvard Business Review talked about a couple of case studies, one good, one bad, which I'll just end on, and then we can have some questions. So let's talk about Sony. Sony made some massive cuts during the 2000 downturn. When over a 2-year period, it cut its workforce by 11%, its R&D by 12%, capital expenditures by 23%. And this did in fact help Sony increase its profit margin from 8% to 12%. But growth in its sales fell from an average of 11% in the 3 years before the recession to 1% thereafter. And since then, it really hasn't fully recovered. It's made up some ground, but it actually never gained back what it lost. As the Harvard Business Review says, few cost-cutting corporations do well after a recession. They trail other groups with growth on average of 6% in sales and 4% in profits, compared with 13% and 12% for progressive companies that didn't cut during a recession. Sales for the 200 largest companies grew by an average of 12 billion over pre-recession levels. However, the cost-cutting enterprises among them saw sales grow by an average of just 5 billion, and profits typically rose by only 600 million, whereas for other companies that didn't cut, they increased by an average of 6.6 billion. So, as we can see, cost-cutting, particularly for marketing, communications, advertising, that type of thing, has several ramifications. Within a company, executives and employees start approaching every decision through a loss minimization lens. So they go into that siege mentality that I was talking about before. What that leads to is aiming low, it limits innovation, and it leads to ongoing incremental cost cutting. So once that cost cutting starts, it carries on. The organisation tries to do more of the same with less, which affects quality and, most importantly, customer satisfaction. So customer loyalty diminishes and customers start to leave in droves. The finance department makes across-the-board cuts, paying little attention to initiatives that may be vital for post-recession growth. Then, of course, inevitably, the pessimism sets in across the organisation and your best staff leave. So you've got a company in significant trouble. Okay, so a good case study. So during the 2000 recession, Target in the US increased its marketing and sales expenditures by 20% and its capital expenditures by, I think it was 15% over pre-recession levels. It increased the number of stores it operated. It added super Target stores. It extended into new merchandise segments, invested in credit card programs, and also invested in its internet business. Meanwhile, it did manage to reduce some costs by improving productivity and enhance the efficiency of its supply chain. It was one of the retailers to found the Worldwide Retail Exchange, a global business-to-business electronic marketplace, to facilitate trading between retailers and vendors. In 2001, it consolidated its Dayton and Hudson stores under Marshall Fields to take advantage of this well-known brand name. This helped Target grow sales by 40% and profits by 50% over the recession. Its profit margin increased from 9% in the 3 years before the recession to 10%. It did this by also strengthening its position in a needs segment, which was food. It launched a new store format to double the amount of floor space devoted to food and extended its range of food brands and overhauled its food operations basically to meet a need that it saw. The retailer also increased media spending and reaffirmed its positioning with the slogan, "Expect more, pay less," with an emphasis on the second half. By 2008, the market pantry sales had increased by 30% and Archer's Farms by 13%. And food has become a billion-dollar business for Target. Now, they did all this when all its competitors were cutting and they decided to invest. So here are a few tips before we move on to question time. So as I was saying, remember your humanity. You're there to make real connections, and this is even more important in downturns. You absolutely have to be communicating with your customers now or you will lose them. Be more visible. You are competing for a smaller share of wallet, so you need to be louder to get it. However, your budget will stretch further at this time. Media outlets are struggling, so now is a time to negotiate and experiment, maybe do some A/B testing, maybe throw out some new channels, see what works, see what comes back at you. You don't know what you don't know until you try. Make sure, and this is probably the most important point, marketing has to have a seat at the C table. If you're not visible, you are easier to chop. So marketing needs to get a seat at that table, and we often have to fight to get it and fight to keep it. But given that we have under our purview now so much data and analytics and proof of ROI, we can in fact sit there at that table and have a very financial conversation. Invest in a marketing partner. It's a great way to start if you can't afford a marketing department in-house. And finally, and I think that everybody needs to consider this carefully, because marketing is talking to customers all the time, because we are the ones that are front-facing, because we are the ones that want to find out what customers think, we are informing innovation. We are finding out what it is that customers want and whether we're actually providing it or not. And can we pivot to perhaps provide it if we're not already doing so? So this kind of innovation flows naturally from listening to the customer. So what purpose does your business serve? What is it that you are trying to fill? What need are you trying to fill? And while most people would say, well, we're trying to make a profit, that's actually not the right answer to that question. You are fulfilling a need for a particular segment or customer. So what is it that you are doing, and what are you doing to keep it? And yeah, that's my presentation. And if you have questions, throw them at me.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. That was a fantastic presentation. If we can all give a round of applause for Vanessa.
Thank you.
And now we'll open the floor up to some questions.